All right, welcome, college baseball fans. I am once again joined by Duke's Chad Knight. I think I called you a catcher last week. I know that's what you were recruited as, but you played third base as well. Yeah, you're just basically a utility guy, right?
You know, when people ask me for my position, I just say I'm a hitter. So
there you go. I mean, yeah, there you go. Once again, we're just talking some ball. Happy to have you on. I got a lot of rave reviews about last week. A lot of fun. First thing I want to talk about, you guys had your exam week, chance to reset. You guys had a bit of a tune-up, I guess, yesterday with Longwood doubleheader. Good big sweep, 34-4, outscored them. What are the vibes around the team?
I think we're really happy to be done with school, first and foremost. I mean, ever since I've been at Duke, we always talk about this theme of Mayball, which is when we kind of get to just act like a minor league baseball team or a major league baseball team, where we don't worry about going to class anymore. There's less clutter in your mind, and you can really just focus on playing baseball and being around your teammates. And that's usually the best time of the year. The weather starts to get nicer, and you start to play pretty meaningful baseball as we get closer to the postseason. So this is an exciting time. I think for me, it being my last year too, I got one more time to try and make it to Omaha, and I think I'm really excited.
Oh yeah, I was going to save it for next week, but I was going to start to ask you about the sentimentality of the last couple of weeks. But I think I'll save it for next week when it's getting into rivalry week. But I'm sure it's settling in a little bit.
You're going to provoke some tears if you do. So
yeah, but yeah, everyone's feeling refreshed as well. Like you're not stressed. Your stress is now being kind of condensed into one spot, as opposed to being spread out a little bit. I'm assuming you did well on your exams. Did you find out yet?
I've gotten 2 of the grades back. Did well. Almost done.
Right.
Just one more grade to come out, but I'm not.
There
really
you go. Right. Yeah. Again, unofficially done. Was graduation this past week? I know.
It's weird. So we actually have to miss our graduation because we're at Georgia Tech. Typically,
that's what I think.
We always graduate on Sundays, and then we always are playing on Sundays. So we have a little special private graduation on the Monday morning afterwards. So
that's pretty cool. And you got to do that last year for your undergrad, right? And then
the private graduation, where it was
private graduation. Yeah.
I mean, it was nice though. I mean, one of the cool Duke traditions I did get to do is when you graduate from Duke, the tradition is you go to the chapel or you stay up all night. You do whatever you want, and then you go to the chapel at 6 a.m, watch the sunrise with all your friends. And I got to do that last year, and that was one of my favorite moments at Duke too. So I pulled an all-nighter and rolled graduation and wore sunglasses during the entire
thing. There you go. That's pretty cool, though. That's a pretty special moment. So, and you got to play a little bit on in the first game, right? Did you you just pinch hit?
I got another walk and went to third base. So Longwood's always been a really good team. I mean, 2 years ago, we went to extra innings with them. I think we won on a walk-off walk. They actually brought in a position player to pitch who threw like a shutout inning against us a couple of years ago. Last year, I think we had to come back from like a pretty significant deficit, and we orchestrated a pretty good comeback against them. So they've always been a really good team. And I think going into it, we've played some really good mid-majors this year. We've played, Gardner-Webb was a good team that we played. Ryder was always a really good team. We saw them in the Super Regional last year. They've always given us some trouble. Those are gritty teams, really well coached, play really fundamentally sound baseball. So I think going into yesterday, we were, we knew we had to be sharp and play our best baseball. But I think definitely having school in the
rearview
mirror kind of freed us up, and the team played great. The pitching staff was phenomenal. The offense really showed out. I think in every phase, really, we it was a really good sign.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent to see because, again, like you said, none of these teams that you're going to play are easy, and they can really take advantage of you if you're not focused. And
sure.
You see that
the way I like to describe it is it's like playing a very veteran college basketball team. You may not have a bunch of 5-star recruits, but you have guys that have played together and they know how to play with each other and they know how to play fundamentally sound baseball. Like any other team with a bunch of seniors you'd see in a March Madness tournament. They'll go toe-to-toe with you any day. So you can never really, take your foot off the gas pedal.
Another cool thing you guys got to do this weekend, the baseball bonanza with the Duke Autism Center. Got to interact with those kids. It looked like, I saw a bunch of the photos, looked like a really great time, a really an underrated part, I think, of college athletics, but I see it a lot in baseball, is the interactions, the community service opportunities that you guys get to have and give back. What's that kind of feel like for you?
Yeah, I think it's a day that a lot of us look forward to every year. We're lucky enough where we get to volunteer a little bit with the Miracle League in the fall, and then with the Duke Center for Autism in the spring, and just to be around those kids and give back to the community. Go play baseball, something that's so natural for us, but for them, it's a really fun activity for them every day. And see the smiles that a lot of those kids have just being out there, enjoying being around us, seeing their parents. It's truly just one of the most rewarding experiences for us, especially. I know that it's community service and it's volunteering on our part, but it's something that we really, really enjoy, and it's a great way to practice gratitude too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love everything that's being done with the youth in general. Like, around the league, you always see there's youth Sundays where kids get to come on the field and get autographs. And I'm trying to remember, I think Duke does something like that, right? Where they've got kids running the bases, or
I think on some Sundays, yes.
on Sundays, yeah. I know. I just love seeing all that and trying to make sure, because I heard something about like MLB found out like the average age of a baseball fan is like 57. And something like that. They're like, I wonder why. It's like we need to market to the younger generation and really get the kids involved. And college baseball seems to be doing their part. So,
Yeah, I think baseball's definitely one of the sports where going to a game in person, the experience is completely different and way, way better than watching on TV in some respects. Football, you could kick your feet up on the couch and enjoy watching an NFL game or a college football game any day. Basketball's so fast. It's the same way as football. Baseball, there's so many other, intimate things about being at a ballpark and watching a game in person that I think, with college baseball, you have this unique opportunity that a lot of schools are in these nice college towns that don't have professional baseball teams. North Carolina doesn't have a professional baseball team. So you really are able to have a community such as Durham or Chapel Hill, or Raleigh, where people are able to come out to games and we can kind of build a relationship with the community. And it's a little bit more of an intimate experience for the fans as well.
So now we're getting into our stretch run. Exams are over. You're in baseball mode. You've got you and the boys have a tough week this week. You got East Carolina this week. Is it tomorrow? At East Carolina. Have you played at East Carolina before? The atmosphere is really unique from what I understand. I've not had a chance to go to a game. Are you excited about that?
Oh, we're so excited. I mean, that's definitely one of my favorite places to play. I haven't been in 2 years. Last year we played them at the DBAP, but 2 years ago we were there. 3 years ago we were there. My freshman year we couldn't just because of COVID and our season got cut short. I think we were scheduled to go there, but it's always a great atmosphere. They're always a really, really well coached and really, really talented team. So I think anytime we get to play a top 10 team in a midweek matchup is a privilege for us. We're excited for the competition. We're excited for the challenge it's going to provide us. So should be can't miss like college baseball tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I'm excited for that one. It's probably going to be the highlighted game of across the country in terms of midweek games. It's got to be tough though, going from obviously this week's a little different because you're coming off the exam week, but normally you're grinding through ACC play, and it can be a real challenge to then go on the road to a top 10 team in the middle of the week after the ACC grind. I know. Definitely. I talked to like Georgia Tech, and they were saying they were having some trouble sometimes where you're so exhausted from the weekends that it's hard to really come to play on the midweeks.
Definitely, and sometimes you see it with the pitching staff too. If you go through a lot of pitchers, or if you use up a lot of your depth on the week, some of those guys are still recovering come Tuesday, even though you have the Monday off day. So I think we're definitely have our batteries charged tomorrow, though, and we'll be going with full force. We're excited.
Yeah, and you guys just had most of the weekend off. They had a tough series. I'm looking forward to that. I know their atmosphere at ECU is unique in this part of the country. It's very much like a SEC atmosphere at times, from what I understand. I need to get down there. They're probably going to host a regional, so that'll be interesting to see. But you've got Georgia Tech on the road in Atlanta, beautiful ballpark. I wanted to ask, how much of an opportunity do you guys have to do anything but play baseball? I know obviously Friday and Sunday. Friday you get, you've got the game. It's normally a night game, so that's it. Sunday you've got the game, and then you're getting out of town. What is there any opportunity to like try a restaurant or anything on Saturday?
When we're traveling, or just in general?
Traveling,
Well, when we're traveling, one of the cool things we do is sometimes we'll go out to eat as a team. So I remember last year during the regional, we went out and ate a bunch of times. We went to a bunch of nice restaurants, and that's a great way to bond with your teammates. The whole coaching staff and support staff goes as well, and it's a nice little team outing. The guys are typically given the option whether or not they want to eat with their families or with their friends on the road, or if they want to eat with the team. Meals are provided, but you can always opt out and you go to restaurants. I think this weekend in Atlanta when we go to Georgia Tech, I'm going to go see my dad because he's coming to one of the games, and I know I have an old coach that's going to be at the series as well, and I might go have lunch or dinner with him one time as well. But guys are always given the option to go with their families. Obviously, meals will be provided, but when we're on the road, it's tough. You can't really. I mean, you don't have your car with you. Mobility is a little bit restricted. You're with your parents, but honestly, most of the time, a lot of the best memories of a college baseball season are built on the road. They're coming from those bus rides. They come from spending time in the hotel. We love to play Mafia as a team. We love to play a lot of Password. Sometimes just when you have time to kill and you're sitting in a room with, your roommate, or you get a bunch of guys together and you watch a college baseball game in a room, that's where some of the best memories are made. I know for me, when I look back at my experience in college baseball, that's one of the, I think, underrated things that I'm going to really, really miss about it. Just having the opportunity to have downtime with your teammates in a hotel room watching college baseball or fooling around.
Right. Yeah. You've instantly got your friend base there. You don't have to text and be like, "Hey, I just got off work. What are you doing?" Like you're immediately there and it's all in place, and you guys can be bored together if you're bored. But I imagine it doesn't happen too often.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing about a road trip is the challenge of a road trip, I guess, when it's long or when you have downtime is, how do you have fun in an environment that wouldn't typically be fun? For example, we have a 6-7 hour bus ride. And I think one of the challenges for a team is, okay, how can you have fun? How can you make those 6 or 7 hours go faster? And for us, we love to play Mafia. We'll play for 6 or 7 hours straight. That's been something we've done ever since I've been at Duke. I think
I love that.
Every college baseball team does that. I know they do it in summer ball. It's like, it's like your rite of passage. I'm sure if I were to go talk to any former college baseball player, they've played Mafia at some point in their college baseball career. But like I said, that challenge of how can you turn, maybe a bad situation into something good, that's an opportunity for team building. And maybe it's not something that it's required, but it definitely is a sign of a good team culture.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, as much as we talk about statistics, the intangibles of a good clubhouse and good teams always have good chemistry. It's got to be a little bit more than just talent, and that's always an important, underrated part of building a team, to really enjoy each other and want to go out there and bust your butts for each other.
We spend a lot of time with one another. So, having a good team culture and being close with the guys that you're with all the time, that definitely makes it more enjoyable.
Absolutely. So it doesn't sound like you get to experience much of the cities or the towns that you're visiting, outside of a couple restaurants, but what's your favorite ACC stadium to play in? And you actually did tell me this, but I don't know,
I'm comfortable saying it on air too. I love playing at the Bosch. I love playing at UNC Stadium. I think they have a great fan base. Stadium is always, filled with fans. Weather when we always play there is always beautiful too. It's always typically towards the end of the season where it's a little bit, warmer out. You got a Carolina blue sky, and I think the backdrop in that place is beautiful too. It's really easy to see the big fun place to hit, and I've always really enjoyed playing there. I also love playing at Clemson. Clemson always has a great atmosphere. It's hitter-friendly ballpark too, so you can change the game, like that. Probably number 3 for me would probably be Florida State, 2 or 3. The atmosphere there is just incredible too.
Oh, yeah.
When you do the tomahawk chop, it's like being at an Atlanta Braves game. I actually think it's better than the Atlanta Braves atmosphere when, the Braves hit a home run or when they're changing the pitcher. I went to a Braves World Series game back in 2021 when they beat the Astros. I think went to Game 5, and it was an incredible, experience. But even when they did the tomahawk chop at the Braves Stadium, I don't think it was half as loud as it was in Tallahassee.
Oh yeah, and it's great that Florida State is back among the college baseball elite, because it's just they're such a great program, and it's good for the conference as well. So I'm looking forward to see their atmosphere if they get to host a regional. but they also travel really well too. So,
I'll be a hostile environment down there, but it'll be a cool experience for anyone that has the opportunity to go.
Absolutely. What's the favorite stadium you've ever played in?
I'm gonna get laughed at for saying this, but I played in the Little League World Series when I was 12, and playing in London Stadium. I mean, that's still to this day probably my fondest baseball memory. Have had a lot of fond ones here at Duke. Had a lot of fond ones in high school. But just being 12 years old, where you're not worried about anything in the world, you're just out there with your best friends that you grow up with, your neighbors, playing at the biggest stage there is. That stadium was just unbelievable. I mean, there were 30,000 people at a game, and now if I saw 30,000 people, I'd be like, oh my god, you feel your heartbeat, you feel your blood pressure rise. When I was 12 years old, it's like, oh, this is pretty cool,
Yeah, kids.
Your age.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, kids don't think about it too much. They go, "This is awesome, okay," and then, but as an adult, you're like, "Oh no, what if I mess up?" And you get all the anxiety and everything. But that's so cool. Yeah, I forgot that you had done that because I think it's on your profile for Twitter. And,
I always like to joke that I peaked when I was 12. So
yeah, hey, I mean, if you're peaking, but then your low is still pretty high, I think you're fine. But that's pretty awesome. I can't imagine that kind of feeling when you're 12.
It truly is an incredible place to go, even if you don't play in the World Series. I remember going back in the years after I played there and going with my cousins or going with some other friends, or a kid that I used to give hitting lessons to actually had the opportunity to play in it 4 years after I did, and going back to watch him. It's such an incredible place. It's such a friendly environment. It's just families and their kids taking kids to go play baseball, and it's such a supportive atmosphere. Little League baseball, I think, is so much fun to watch because it's imperfect. I think when you watch a really clean baseball game, it's I can appreciate it as a baseball player, but I think sometimes the sloppiness is what makes it feel a little bit more real to me. When you're 12 years old and a 10-run lead can disappear in 2 innings, I think that's what makes the game fun to watch. It's engaging for the fans. They're 6-inning games. They're really quick, and kids never really stop believing in themselves. And I think that's something that when you get older, you can get a little bit more pessimistic, I guess cynical, or become a little bit more realistic. But I think that innocence as a child, especially as a little leaguer, is one of the more valuable things as an athlete, and it's on full display on TV every August.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to watch, just because they're allowed to have fun. They're allowed and they aren't afraid to have fun and smile the whole time and act like they're big. Like they realize, like, pretend they're big leaguers making this big moment. It's really cool because a lot of times, like, you don't always see that. You see a little bit more in the college level, but at MLB you don't see it as much. It's getting a little bit looser. But I'd like, especially at the MLB level, I'd like to see these guys who are being paid to play baseball have fun. Like, because I want your job, I'd like you to show that you're having some fun there. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, there's mixed motives when, I guess, as you get older. Once it starts becoming a job, there's always going to be, I guess, different undertones in people's motivations and whatnot. But Little League baseball, college baseball, I guess really at the amateur level, it's a lot of fun to watch, especially if you're a baseball fan. Devin Obi actually also played in the Little League World Series. He played there twice, I think, in 2015 and 16. So we got 2 guys in the game that played Williamsport.
Wow, that's pretty big. But you've got some guys that have also some teammates who have already made it to the big leagues. We discussed that you've got 4 teammates. Your freshman year roommate was Graham Pauly, who was that? Was that? Right?
He was my roommate last year. He wasn't my freshman year roommate. My best friends at Duke. I roomed with him last year and basically the year before. And then Jaleel Profito, Matt Mervis, and Bryce Jarvis, and hopefully 1 or 2 more maybe by the end of the year.
And I wouldn't be surprised. Alex Mooney, for instance, I thought was a really underrated draft pick for the Guardians. I think they got him in like the 7th round or something like that. And he's a really good shortstop. And Marcus Johnson was a really good pitcher a couple of years ago. I remember watching him. So, Duke is back in the golden ages of baseball in the last, 8 years since 2016. Coach Pollard's done a really fantastic job, really, since, the first sustained period of success since like the 50s. and it's really cool because you've got to be part of a couple of regional teams, but you've also gotten a super regional team. You've gotten to be an ACC champion in 2021, right? That must have been pretty amazing.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, the funny thing is, for like half of that season, we weren't even that good of a ball club. We were like 500 team until May, and then once school was over, I think we won 12 straight games to win the ACC championship. It's amazing what happens when you got to stop worrying about an exam in the back of your mind.
Yeah, especially the fact that Duke is a highly demanding academic school doesn't it's probably a bit of a relief to not have to worry about that and just focus on baseball.
I mean, it's what you sign up for, though. But
well, yeah. So,
but no, those four are incredible. I mean, I know Grant the best out of all of them. Mervis was a senior when I was a freshman. He was an incredible leader, someone I always really looked up to. I think when the draft got cut short that year, he signed as a free agent. Probably would have gotten drafted. He was on his way to having probably an All-ACC or borderline All-American caliber season. He had an unbelievable preseason and, was a tremendous player. Just when the season got cut short, the draft got cut short, I think he signed as like a free agent, which makes the story all that much better. Didn't really play too much his first 2 years at Duke. I think he had less than 20 at-bats in his first 2 full years at Duke, which is crazy to think about. Junior year, hit like 280 or 286, had a decent year. Then goes and hits like 330 in the Cape, wins the Cape Cod League championship with the Katua Cavaliers, kind of puts himself on the map. And then his senior year, like I said, he was on his way to having a great year. And then draft gets cut short, pandemic happens. It was everyone's first pandemic. As a free agent, and then, works his way up to the big leagues. Coach Pollard always likes to talk about tough people and how, that quality of toughness and building callus around is, something that will take you really, really far in life. And I'm sure for him, it certainly did. Just how much can you take? How many times can you be told no and, still want to prove people wrong? I think that was always a valuable lesson that I'm sure he took away from, I guess, his Duke experience, just his life experience in general. But it's really cool to see him on the Cubs, such a storied franchise. And it's been fun to watch him play. Bryce Jarvis. Now, Bryce was a little bit different. Bryce was, a first rounder in 2020. He was another one of those guys. Bryce was the best college pitcher I've ever seen. Even to this day, where I've had the opportunity to play with Jonathan Santucci, who's been incredible for us this year. I've had the opportunity to see Chase Burns in person. Obviously, I never saw Paul Skeens. He's incredible. But in person, the best college pitcher I've ever seen was Bryce Jarvis, and it's hands down. He threw 95, 96. He had 4 pitches that he could throw in the zone on command, on a string, wherever he wanted to. Threw a perfect game. I remember against Cornell. I think the funny thing was it was Cornell's like first baseball game of the year, and they play in Ithaca, New York, where it's freezing out.
Yeah.
It's like the 3rd or 4th week of February. And I remember around the 6th inning, I was in the bullpen, and I was like, oh, no one's getting warmed up yet. I guess, Bryce is obviously having a great outing, but I wonder when someone's going to start getting hot. And then I looked at the scoreboard. I was like, oh, my God. Like, they have no hits. He's throwing a no-hitter. I'm like, has he walked anyone? And I remember the leadoff came up in the 7th inning. I'm like, oh, my God, he has a chance here to throw a perfect game. And then he did. I mean, it was incredible. I'm a huge baseball fan, so just any perfect game is incredible. But to be a part of one or be a teammate of the pitcher who threw a perfect game was unbelievable. I remember I was telling my dad, funny story here. So I have 2 older half brothers, and in 1998, took my 10-year-old brother to go and watch a Yankees game. And my dad was busy back then. He was like at the height of his career. And I remember it must have been on a weekend, but I think he got a phone call and he had to go back and go to the office or something like that. And they had to leave in like the middle of the 6th inning. So they're in their car, they're driving back, they're going back to New Jersey. And in the cars where they heard John Sterling, I think, announcing on the radio that David Wells had thrown a perfect game and they had left early. And I think my brother always, I guess, kind of gives my dad a hard time about that. I give my dad a hard time about that because if a guy's throwing a perfect game in the 3rd inning, I'm freaking out if I go to a Yankees game.
Oh, man.
I think that's one game my dad wishes that he had back. But
as soon as you said 98, I was like, this is the David Wells perfect game, isn't it? I was, oh, no way. That's crazy.
Yeah,
oh,
but no,
that's brutal.
I know I went off a little bit of a tangent there, but Bryce was truly incredible. I remember one of the first bullpens I caught when I was in college was his, and it was the easiest bullpen I ever had to catch. Didn't have to move a glove. Like I said, he controlled 4 pitches in the zone on a string. So when he got drafted in the first round, I don't think anyone was really shocked. Really was an incredible pitcher at Duke. He, when Kumar Rocker threw his no-hitter against Duke in this 2019 Super Regionals, a lot of people forget Bryce Jarvis also threw like 7 or 8 shutout innings against them. And obviously that gets forgotten because Vanderbilt went on to win the College World Series, and Kumar Rocker struck out 19 guys that game. But Bryce was a tremendous, tremendous pitcher. And it's really cool to see him be a part of the, defending World Series champions this year.
Was that
World Series runner-ups? Sorry.
Right. Was that like a welcome to college baseball moment when you were catching his bullpen?
Definitely. The scary thing about it is it was a little bit intimidating. It was like, oh God, is this what every college pitcher's like? And I started to,
You're like, how am I going to hit?
You have to realize that that's the cream of the crop, and obviously, that's why he's in the big leagues. So, the other 2 guys. So Joe was one of the best pure hitters I've ever seen. I remember as soon as I walked onto campus, it seemed like he hit everything. We do these things called sim games where it's basically a pitcher throwing a live to a hitter, except you're not in a game. It's basically just live at bats. And I remember like my first couple live at bats, like I flew out, I struck out, I walked, I grounded out. And I was like, okay, like just getting my timing back. And Joe came off the season in the Cape, and I think he hit like 4 doubles in the gap and on 4 consecutive pitches or something like that.
And this is and he just debuted this past weekend.
Oh yeah, Joe.
Yeah,
Joe's a hitter. He rakes.
And what's funny is just last weekend the series you guys just had against Florida State, AJ Gracia just broke his freshman RBI record.
Right. Yeah. Something about Duke outfielders from New Jersey. Joey and AJ. I guess AJ still got his work cut out for him. He's an incredible player too, and definitely one of the most fun freshmen to watch in the country. I mean, I hope he's getting the the press he deserves, because what he's doing is truly incredible. He's like 1-to-1 walk to K. He's hitting 330. He's got 12 bombs, and I lead our team in RBIs, if I'm not mistaken.
I just the plate presence from a freshman is just unreal, especially from and he's batting a lot of times third in a top 10 teams lineup is just unreal. So
it's really, really impressive. And even when I'm gone, when I tune back into Duke baseball, he's going to be one of my favorite players to watch for sure. We really have a lot of good talented freshmen. Him, Chase Cruson, Nicky Winslow, Kyle Johnson is one of the most incredible athletes I've ever seen. He throws 95, 96 on the mound, and was also one of our best hitters too. Now he had a knee, or like a small knee issue halfway through the season where kind of sidelined him for a little bit, so he hasn't been hitting as much, but he's starting to get back in the lineup now. And he's hitting 360 to this point, with the limited amount of bats he has.
Yeah. I think when we talked to Coach Pollard early in the season, I think he had said something like Kyle, originally his plan was just to be a pitcher, but then we found out he could hit. So, and it's just like,
it was like gravy,
yeah.
He's one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet too. Those 4 freshmen, we really have a bunch of talented freshmen. We were talking about Sam Harris. Now he's 116 last week. Every single year, the freshman class gets better and better and better. Makes me feel like I don't even belong here. Like I have the imposter syndrome now, and I'm the 5th year. So
yeah,
they're a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun to be around. They're really, really talented, and they're really, really humble and smart kids as well. So really good representatives of Duke baseball and Duke University.
And Graham Pauley, who he just got sent down, but he made the opening day roster for the Padres. He's been playing with them for up until this point.
Oh, yeah. That's Graham and I go way back. Actually, I played on Graham's travel ball team when I was 16 and 17 years old. So before we even got to Duke, I knew Graham since 2017. Graham, CJ Abrams, and I actually all played on the same team, the same summer ball team. When we were like sophomores in high school. I always tell the story because I think it kind of illustrates, the talent that team had. CJ Abrams always led off. Graham always hit second, and I think I always hit third. And I remember CJ rolls the ball over to the first baseman. Something like he should be out 99% of the time. Beats out a ball. He rolled over to the first baseman. Graham moves him over to second base, and I come up, and I remember I think I flared a ball to right field, somewhere between the center fielder and right fielder. Right fielder comes over, makes the catch, kind of lollygags the ball in, and CJ tagged up from second base and scored on. CJ was one of the fastest players. He ran 360. Scouts always said he had more speed than anyone they've ever seen since Deion Sanders. But looking back, yeah, Graham could always hit. He was always a super fundamentally sound baseball player. His freshman year here in the fall, he struggled a little bit. I think just it's an adjustment. When you go from seeing high school pitching to college pitching, it's a pretty big leap. I mean, that's why what AJ's been able to do is so incredible this year, or Macon, or Chase, or Kyle.
Yeah.
But Graham was always a really, really solid lockdown defender. I always say he's one of the best defenders I've ever seen. But his freshman year, there was just other guys that were, ahead of him. And, he was probably a guy that was going to get redshirted or not really see much playing time his freshman year. Sophomore year came around. The other thing about him is he's one of the hardest workers, probably the hardest worker I know. Put on 20 pounds over the pandemic or during that summer when everyone was sent home. Earned a starting spot. Then one of our seniors, I think, went 4 for 4 or 5 for 5 in his first game of 2021 sophomore year, and kind of Graham saw the bench again, didn't play until May that year when he got a pinch hit at bat when we were down by 10 to North Carolina, hits a home run, starts to get back in the lineup, and by the end of the year, he's our starting second baseman, starting the ACC championship. And by his junior year, he really had an incredible year. I think he hit 290 with 8 homers, but he had more walks than strikeouts. It was always a really, really tough out. He was always an incredible competitor. And that's really, I think, what the difference for him was. Is Grant's one of the most competitive people I ever know, but he's also one of the hardest workers that I ever know. And when you have those two things, you set yourself up for a lot of success. Also, one of the most fun people to be around. I really can't say enough nice things about the kid, but like I said, just was kind of overlooked his, I think, first 2 years when he was here, probably because, he was a little smaller. He wasn't quite the physical specimen that he is now. But that kid worked harder than anyone I've ever known or anyone I've ever seen here. I think he lifted 7 days a week, something that if I get into the weight room 3 days a week, 4 days a week, I'm feeling it. And I'm waddling around. That kid would go in all day, and he worked his tail off. Everything that he's gotten, whether it's minor league player of the year, or whether it's earning himself a draft spot and, earning an opening day roster spot, and now having 2 home runs in the big leagues, it's been so fun to watch. And it's been fun to, for him to be my friend and for, to watch his career this far. So.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is watching the guys that aren't necessarily the biggest recruits, who come in and you watch them develop and they turn themselves into these big time prospects. And I think that's one of the fun things about college baseball.
The other thing about Graham that I always say is, he may not have stood out as much his freshman year or even, beginning of his sophomore year because he wasn't necessarily hitting for power that he has now. I mean, he hit 22 home runs in the minor leagues last year. But that kid never swung and missed. He always had really good plate discipline, kind of skills that really do translate, I think, to the next level, where he was able to kind of develop his power throughout his career through going to the weight room or, a couple re-engineering his swing. But that kid, he never swung and missed. He was always a pest. I remember if you talk to any of our Duke pitchers, his sophomore year, his junior year, he was probably the most annoying kid to pitch to because he never swung and missed, and he was hard to get out, super hard to get out. He may not have hit the ball further than Chris Crabtree did, who was, the strongest guy I think I've ever seen in person. But
yeah,
he's a tough guy to pitch to.
Oh man, and all 4 of those guys and yourself were on that 2020 team where the season got kind of cut short. Does that ever feel like a missed opportunity given your guys' success the year before, and then obviously the 2021 AC Championship? Does that ever feel like a missed opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the best way to compare it is it's like the '94 Expos, right? What could have been? I don't know. I think that team definitely had the chance to go to Omaha. I truly believe that it would have. I mean, it was probably the most talented Duke team I've ever been a part of, top to bottom. I mean, you have 4 big leaguers, like I said, maybe more if you give it a couple of years. Having Jarvis throw on a Friday night, I think that was an automatic win almost every single time he stepped on the mound. And then getting through that lineup was so tough. I mean, Mervis was a really, really tough out. Ethan Murray was an All-American his freshman year, and he's another guy that is like knocking on the doors of the Major League Baseball. Joey Profito was probably going to be an All-American that year. And then Mike Rothenberg was one of the best catchers in the country that year, too. He got drafted, and I think he just finished up his career with the Detroit Tigers. He was an incredible backstop, probably the best defensive catcher I've ever seen, ever. And he was really able to help that pitching staff. He and Jarvis were a pretty incredible battery. So looking back on it, like I said, that was probably the most talented Duke team I've been a part of. I would have loved to have seen what happened in that season played out. But like I said, it's like that 94 MLB season. Nobody really knows. And, I mean, we can think about it, but I think that now Duke's focused on this year, next year, and the future.
Yeah. And the way Coach Pollard has set up this program, it's fantastic, a lot of fun. And when you guys don't even charge for non-conference games. I mean, that's the best value for your buck in the country. You get to see a top 10 program for free. For non-conference games, that's pretty special. I know that'll probably change. It'll probably change as success moves forward, but we'll see. But now we're moving along to our bit of our nerdy part of the show. We're going to talk about wins above replacement here. I'm pulling it up on the screen. You have been updating constantly who the NCAA WAR leaders are. Really quickly, what exactly, can you put it in layman's terms for the audience, what WAR is and why it's useful?
Sure. So WAR stands for wins above a replacement level player. And what it attempts to calculate basically is how many additional wins and I guess the aggregate of all your offensive statistics do you provide over a replacement level player. So imagine if you took your next best player off the bench and you put him in traded places with, Charlie Condon or whatever player you wanted to. How many additional wins does having Charlie Condon, or how many additional wins does Charlie Condon provide over the next best bench player that would be on an average, I guess, college roster? So that's essentially what it likes to, or attempts to calculate. Now it's valuable because at the end of the day, it's nice to, count home runs or see how many hits someone has, or look at their batting average, or their on-base percentage, or their slugging percentage. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it boils down to wins. And wins, I mean, to quote Moneyball almost verbatim, wins come from runs. And all those statistics that we talk about ultimately produce runs. So it really is a good measure of, how much value a player is providing your roster. I think in the big leagues, like they talk about market value per WAR is like $7 or $8 million. So,
right, and we've got the sticks up here. Charlie Condon, everyone knows he's having a monster season. He's headed for that modern home run, the BB Core home run record that I think was just recently set by Caglione last year, and Melendez the year before that. So it's just constantly being broken and rebroken. But the insanity here is I love that you've done this. You've given us our college season pace. He's on pace to get about a half game more WAR. But the 162 game pace is absolutely insane. We talked about it very briefly before we went live, but Barry Bonds had something like a 12 WAR in his 2004 season, right? When he had all those walks. So this is to show you how insane that is.
It's absurd. It's almost double the pace. But when you hit 33 home runs in 47 games, I mean, he's on pace to hit close to 100 home runs in 162 games. It's pretty incredible to think about having an unbelievable year. For reference, I think last year, Ronald Acuna might have had a 9 WAR, like an 8.8 WAR in 162 games. So what Condon's been able to do in his first 47 is honestly just unfathomable. I've hit 8 home runs, I think, in like 150 games for college games or something like that. So for him to hit 33 and 47 may not quite be like Pete Incaviglia in 1984 when I think he hit like 48 and
something like that
with the Oklahoma State back then. But in the BB Core era, it's incredible. It's gonna be interesting to see where he falls in the draft. And obviously, there's other incredible players like JJ Weatherhold or Travis Bazzana or Caglianone or Burns or Hagen Smith or all the other great college players, but he's definitely having the best college season offensively.
And what's really cool about this is it is a very deep college draft this year. So I think there's only like 2 or 3 prep guys in like the top 20. The rest are college guys, which is really cool. So you can kind of see a lot of these guys. I mean, Condon, Bazzana, Caglione, Tibbs has worked his way up. These are all premier guys that are going to be top 15 draft picks most likely. And it's really cool because you see different mock drafts every week. And I have a lot of friends who are Nationals fans who don't watch a lot of college baseball, and they like to pest me when the new mock draft comes out and tell me about this guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, watch the games. Like,
there's a lot of politics that go into the draft, and a lot of it's just depends on accounting and trying to, I guess, maximize the amount of value you get out of your bonus pool that you can, kind of shell out. But it'll be interesting to see where he falls. I mean, he's definitely going to be towards the top, and if not number 1, then soon afterwards. The interesting thing about WAR when calculating college, and this is something I always like to talk about, is just how, obviously, if you play in the SEC, you're facing the best pitching college baseball has to offer. If you play in a major conference, for example, you may not be seeing the same quality of pitching. So I guess WAR isn't standardized here because the level of competition isn't quite uniform. When you're calculating wins above replacement in the big leagues, major league pitching is pretty uniform. But in college baseball, it's not. So,
right.
I mean, there are definitely other variables that come into when you're evaluating players, but when you're looking at just the body of work of the value that some of these players have been able to provide, it's a great place to start. I guess when I calculate WAR, I always like to look at, it comes down to runs created. I think there are many different ways to calculate the statistic. I know Baseball Reference has their own way. I know that Fangraphs has their own way, and they place different weights on, different variables. Mine's pretty basic, just because the amount of data available for college hitters is pretty limited. So I like to start with the Bill James runs created formula, something that he came up with in those old baseball abstracts he wrote in the 80s and 90s. And I think the formula is like hits plus walks divided by at bats plus walks times total bases. I think it's equal to runs created. And when you get to runs created, then what you can do is, typically when you read Tom Tango, another sabermetrician who's very well regarded in the game today, or Bill James, they always talk about how about 10 runs is equal to a win. And what you can do is, if you take their runs created divided by 10, you get their total amount of wins, I guess, their wins created or wins provided. The replacement level thing is what's tricky. Deciding what a replacement level value is pretty subjective. I know in the major leagues, on Fangraphs or on Baseball Reference, they kind of back it out where I think they say there's, let's call it 500 wins above replacement, in an entire season. And they allot like 40% of it to, I think, pitchers, and 60% of it, or some arbitrary number, to hitters. And then they're able to kind of back it out that way. What I do is I typically look around. If you take runs created and then you divide by plate appearances, you essentially get runs created per plate appearance, which is essentially what WOBA tries to calculate. Tom Tango's, weighted on base average. But if you get the runs created per plate appearance, and then you take out the replacement level, which is in college, I think is right around the 10 to 15%, percentile, which is about 0.1. I think Condon's runs created per plate appearance is like a 0.47. So his, runs created per plate appearance above average is 0.37 once you subtract out the 0.1. And once you multiply that by the amount of plate appearances he has, I think that gives you your WAR, or your offensive wins above replacement. Not including base running, not including defense, but strictly offense, of what they can control and what they produce while they're in the batter's box. That's how I get to those numbers.
Yeah, because it gets a little bit more complicated, and I don't know how much the data we have for the other things, right? The fielding and that. So I think it's a little bit harder to do more than that at the college level with the data we have, and it gets a little bit more complicated. But I mean, this just goes to show you how insane some of these numbers are. I know, again, 33 home runs, 47 games for Condon, but I mean, it shows you how great a season James Tibbs is having. He's on pace for a 16 WAR season, basically. And Austin P has 2 guys on this list, a mid-major school there, so that's pretty impressive. But I grabbed from Baseball Reference, I think I grabbed the O War and from some teams to show you some of that. And there's one of your former teammates you just mentioned from Travel Ball down there at the bottom. I just want to point that out. He's right there with the guy he was traded for. Which is really, really cool. CJ Abrams having a breakout season for the Nationals. He's a big reason why the Nationals are currently in the 3rd wild card spot. So I think they should stop the count right now, so the Nats can make the playoffs.
Yeah, if they're smart, they should give him a contract pretty soon.
Yep. So, but I think this does take into account base running. I would imagine, especially with seeing Ellie De La Cruz on there with what he does on the base paths. Bobby Witt.
Yeah, a lot of those guys have a bunch of stolen bases. I mean, the math is pretty intuitive. It's the more bases you get, the more bases you accumulate. The more runs you provide your team with, the more runs you provide your team with, the more value you provide your team with, the more wins you have. So, that's Ohtani at the top.
Yeah, and the Dodgers doing the Dodger things with Betts and Ohtani, and I think what's interesting about the Dodgers is they just don't always get it done in the postseason. And I don't want to necessarily bash the manager, but at some point it's got to be somebody's fault with the players that they have and everyone else seemingly doing their job. But it's a very, very impressive Dodger team year in, year out that tends to fall short, except for that 2020 pandemic season.
Yeah, I think postseason there's so many elements of randomness just because the sample size is so much smaller. You're playing, there's double elimination, triple elimination, or they're best of 7 series. I remember, I think the book's called the Best Team Money Can Buy, written by like Molly Knight in like 2014 or 2015, kind of about the Dodgers strategy when I think they were acquired by Guggenheim in 2012. And they were pretty vocal in their strategy is just get to the playoffs as many times as you can, give yourself an opportunity to compete for that World Series championship. The more times you get to the playoffs, the better chance you have of winning the World Series. So I think their goal is just to win probably 95 plus games, get themselves in the playoffs, and let the rest take care of themselves. I mean, they could have easily had 3 World Series, or they could have had none. But in 2017, they went to 7 games. They made it again in 2018, and then in 2020, in the shortened season, they won as well. And then teams after that, they've won 105, 106, 104 games. Really, really complete teams. Just you run into the Nationals in 2019, and Juan Soto can, put you guys away with Anthony Rendon, or was it a couple years? Was it last year or 2 years ago when Kershaw, I think, gave a couple home runs to
it was 2019 to Soto and Rendon.
Right, when Kershaw. Yeah.
That was they were up to. But Kershaw's numbers in the postseason are just not great. But I think sometimes they also trot him out there in situations they probably shouldn't. But I mean, as a Yankees fan, you got to be pleased seeing Juan Soto on that list.
Oh, definitely. I mean,
not a surprise, but
I think I would take him over every single player on this list if I could. I think he's probably has the highest floor of any player here, and has the highest probability of reaching a ceiling too. I mean, he's 26 years old. He's besides Gunnar Henderson and Ellie De La Cruz and Bobby Witt, and I mean, he's one of the youngest players on this list. So.
Well, and what's funny is, I remember when he was getting called up, he wasn't a big prospect for the Nationals, and he actually got called up. There was a bunch of injuries with the outfield. Victor Robles was in AAA and was hurt, so they couldn't go to Robles, and they called him up out of necessity. And it's just, again, very unreal plate discipline from him, and he's very likable if he's on your team, I think.
Take at bats off, Believe me, it gets maddening sometimes when you watch. I remember when the Yankees acquired Joey Gallo a couple of years ago, and it was like, oh, so now we're going to have Judge, Stanton, and Gallo in the middle of the lineup, where there's going to be more swing and misses than I can count on 10 different hands, So
yeah, because that was the nice thing is even when Soto slumped, he was walking a lot.
Yeah.
So
I always like to say, I think a fun thing to play around with in your mind is when a hitter doesn't get hits, how can they still if a hitter relies on getting hits to provide value, and getting hits is unpredictable, that therefore the value a hitter might provide is also unpredictable. But if a hitter doesn't rely on hits to produce value, such as Juan Soto, then he's predictably good. He's a really, really high floor. And when he does get hits, he's even more valuable. So, I mean, in 2022, when he had a down year, he's still at a borderline 900 OPS. And for most people, that would be probably the peak of their career. But for him, it was a bad year.
Yep. That's what was cracking me up with some of the Padres stuff. Is they're like, oh, he's not doing that well. And I'd look, I'm like, he's got his OPS is still like over 850. What are you talking about? Most people would kill for that for a good year. Do you have any predictions on who do you think will end up with the highest WAR? Do you think Mookie Betts is going to have an MVP season? Do you think Ohtani catches him?
Yeah, I think it's tough for Soto to have the highest WAR just because, I mean, Betts is playing shortstop. It's a premium position.
That's right. I forgot he was playing shortstop this year.
WAR, I mean, he also has the base running and stuff like that. I mean, I would say Soto's probably going to be top 5 by the end of the year. That wouldn't shock me in the slightest. But Bobby Witt also, I mean, that guy has the potential to be a 40-50, 40-40 type player almost every year in, year out. But, I'm going to tiptoe around the topic of sports betting, but if I were to make a bet, I would probably take a top 5 WAR finish out of Juan Soto would probably provide you with the best odds.
Oh, yeah. I hope to keep seeing CJ Abrams go up because, I mean, as an Nats fan, it's nice to see the youth doing well. I know the organization hasn't been spending much, but hopefully they can get him an extension soon before he starts to price out of that, as they've let that happen to, Trey Turner and Juan Soto and all that. So Bryce Harper.
Sometimes, I mean, Harper left in 2018 or in 2018.
Yeah.
And then they won the World Series. So sometimes breakups, that could happen to you, right?
And to be honest, Bryce is perfect for Philadelphia. He just fits that city so well with how he is, and I think it turned out okay. It just kills me to see all those ex-nationals in Phillies jerseys, but it's better than the Braves, I guess. But anyway, that's pretty much all we've got for this episode. We'll probably be back next week. I plan on having Chad on for the rest of the season as the co-host, and we'll find some more fun stuff to talk about. He's got plenty of stories. I mean, he just pulled out talking about CJ Abrams. I didn't even know about that before we start on that. So Chad's got plenty of fun stuff left in the tank to talk about. I hope. I'm sure he does. So we'll be back hopefully next week. This, Chad, you got anything else you want to add, or?
No, just thank you for having me on again, Monty. Looking forward to next week, and I'm sure we can recap ECU, Georgia Tech, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the regionals that are coming up.
Absolutely. It's a fun time for college baseball. School is out. But we will see you next week.